and welcome to Florence and Flowers. My name's Carly and I'm going to show you how to make a dried flower Christmas wreath using one of our Florence and Flowers kits. These are available to buy over on the website, and the one that I'm using today is called the Traditional Christmas Dried Flower Wreath Making Kit. But if you have a look, we've got a number of different designs, so you should find a colourway that suits you and your home decor. So I'm going to start off by showing you what's in the kit, and then I'm going to talk you through how to make a lovely dried flower wreath ready in time for Christmas. Okay, so when you place your order, you'll receive a box like this, which will contain everything that you need. So you'll have a lovely bunch of dried flowers in the colours of your choice. Like I say, this one is the traditional dried flower wreath making. You'll also contain a bunch like this, which is your greenery to go with your flowers. All of it is dried, nothing in here is fresh. You will then have a number of adornments, embellishments. So we've got some pine cones, just pop those down to one side. We've got some orange slices, nice and Christmassy. You'll then have a bag of preserved moss, which you're going to use as your base, a length of twine, a reel of binding wire. You'll have a number of green wires. These are kind of short lengths of thicker wire, which we use to attach all of our embellishments. Your ring, and also some instructions. Okay, so box down there. So you're going to start off by taking the piece of twine, and we need to attach this to our circle. So untie that, double it over like so, and then just thread it through the frame like you would if you were stringing a gift tag. Pull it nice and tight, add a knot sort of 2 to 3 inches before the end, and then I like to just bow those tails. This is just there to provide you with something to hang your wreath up when you're finished. And the next bit is to take your reel of wire, find the end of that, it's normally poked in through the top, undo it, unravel just a short piece, don't go unraveling loads of wire at a time because it will all tend to snag on each other. And we're just going to feed that through the frame again and just tie one very simple knot, pull it nice and tight against the frame, and then that short edge or that short piece, we're just going to wrap that around several times until it's all used up, just so we don't have a sharp scratchy piece of wire left loose. Okay, then you want to take your bag of moss. So this is preserved reindeer moss. It's in a nice natural colour. So tip that out on the bench. Don't worry about making mess. If you worry about making mess, then you're not going to get very far with making your wreath, because it is a little bit of a messy job. So if you were doing this at home, I'd probably lay some paper down or something like that just to make it easier to clear up at the end. So you've got enough moss there to go all the way around your ring, and you just want to pick up a little piece at a time, kind of lay it on. You don't need it to be terribly thick because it's just providing you with a bed to position all of your dried flowers onto. Once it's on there, picking up your reel of wire, we're binding round just 2 or 3 times over that first piece. Pull the wire nice and tight against the frame, as tight as you can, without actually snapping it off. Once you've got your first piece on, you're then just going to go back in and lay on the next piece. And you'll be surprised, but that will all stay in place just by binding round like that. So don't need to worry at this point about how decorative it looks. You can be as messy as you want at this stage. You're not going to see any of this moss at the end. All of this is going to be covered up using all of your beautiful dried flowers and grasses and foliage. So this is an opportunity to just practice binding with that wire. So pulling it nice and tight each time you go round so that you don't have any bits of material coming loose. Just scoop up them last bits. but it doesn't matter how messy it looks, as long as you've got a fairly even, consistent layer. It doesn't need to be particularly thick. Obviously, if you were using fresh moss for a fresh wreath, you'd want that fairly thick because you'd want it to be holding all of the moisture in to keep your wreath looking nice and fresh. But as this is all dried, we're not looking to keep it fresh. We only need just a thin little layer just to provide us with a base. So I've got my base mossed up there. So next thing is to get our foliage. Cut that open and lay out all of your lovely greenery. So you should find that you've probably got sort of 3 or 4 different types of dried grasses. Just cut those open. So yeah, I've got a bit of panicum, I've got some ceteria, I've got some lovely oats, and I've got plenty of wheat, which is all there. And then you can also at this stage cut open your beautiful bunch of dried flowers. And again, you're going to find that there's lots of variety in this bunch. So this is a traditional Christmas bunch, so we've got lots of reds and golds. We've got some red achillea, we've got some hare's tails, we've got some red amaranthus, we've got some gold birch, we've got some different sort of festive coloured ferns, some gold birch sticks, white birch sticks, natural birch sticks. I'm just laying all of this out. I think some of it might be off camera, but I'm just kind of laying it all out on my bench. Got some beautiful preserved green eucalyptus and some nigella seed pods, red canary grass, white helichrysums. They're a nice focal flower. We've got some lovely red ceteria. I'm going to pop that this side with my grasses. I've also got some preserved red eucalyptus, and I've got some preserved red ruscus. So there's a little bit of a difference between things that are preserved and things that are dried. Dried is just a very natural process, taking a flower stem, hanging it upside down and just letting it dry. Whereas when we say something's preserved, it's normally gone through more of a chemical process. It tends to be with things like foliage, like eucalyptus, and things like roses. It's a way of keeping those things nice and soft, but ensuring that they last a long time as well. So there's a bit of a difference between preserved and dried, but ultimately all of them are going to be everlasting. And we've got some white ruscus, white larkspur, and some nigella orientalis as well, which are a lovely kind of, I think they're also called the octagon flower, but I always think they look a little bit like stars, so they're quite nice for Christmas. So I'm going to lay all of that out there, and then I'm going to show you how to start binding on your dried flowers onto your ring. So when I'm making a dried wreath, I always start with wheat. So that's this one here. You'll have plenty of that in your kit. So you want to get kind of 3 or 4, maybe 5 pieces of wheat together in your hand, like so. And wheat's nice and sturdy, so in terms of making a dried flower wreath, having a nice kind of flat base for each of your flower sprigs will make sure that you have a nice consistent circle at the end, because nothing's going to kind of flop about or disappear off the edge, because it's all going to be laying on this nice stable base. So 4 or 5 pieces of wheat, pull them all up to pretty much the same height, and then on top of your wheat you can layer some of your other stuff. So I might go for another type of grass. I might go for a red canary grass, maybe a piece of larkspur, and I've got 3 of these hare's tails here. So they are now all layered up on top of my wheat sprig. I'm going to cut them down just to make them a bit more manageable. So I've cut them to kind of, I don't know, is this kind of 20 centimetres, something like that. This ring that I'm using is the 12-inch ring. We sell this kit in an 8-inch version and a 12-inch version. So I like quite a nice big wreath. And I cut mine to around kind of 15-20 centimetres. Getting the first piece on is probably the hardest piece in some respects, because you want to make sure that you get it on at the right angle, facing in the direction that you want it to go. If you get that first piece on nicely, the rest of your wreath is going to flow really easily. So we're laying that on top of where we've just mossed onto the ring. So bottom of the stems, nicely in between the inner and the outer edges of that wire ring. And we're just going back and picking up that original reel of wire, and we're binding over in exactly the same way that we did with the moss. We pull that nice and tight. So go around maybe just 2 or 3 times, and that's our first piece on. And from there, we just want to repeat that process once again. So I'm going back and I'm getting more wheat. So I've got another 5 pieces there. And then this time round, I'm going to layer up with something a bit different. So if where you've got nice foliages and things, I'd recommend kind of cutting them down. You should be able to get 2 or 3 nice pieces out of one piece of foliage. So I'm just going to layer that nice, lovely piece of red ruscus on top of my other bits. And I'm going to go for a couple of nigellas, and then maybe a piece of red amaranthus. So again, I've started with wheat as my base, but I've then layered up lots of other things on top. Cut it to the same length that you did the previous piece. That's really the key to getting a nice consistent circle, is by keeping everything to the same length and binding it on at the same angle, facing the same direction. So I'm right-handed and I go clockwise around the wreath. So my first piece laying on like that. My second piece is then going to come up to the same height pretty much that my first piece was on. So it's going to extend out as far, and it's covering over the wire from the first piece. It's pushed up nice and close without completely overlapping, and then I'm picking up that wire and I'm binding round once again nice and tightly 2 or 3 times. So now, because I've got a couple of pieces on there, what I'm going to do is put a little piece on the inner edge. So I've got just a couple of pieces of wheat this time, and what I'm going to do is make up a smaller sprig than I had been making previously. So I've got a little piece of my red eucalyptus and maybe one of my helly heads, like that, and I'm going to lay that on that inner piece and bind it on in exactly the same way 2 or 3 times. So that's just going to ensure that I'm covering up all the inner part of my wreath circle. So I tend to put on a couple of big pieces and then a little piece and then a couple more big pieces and then another little piece. So back to the start, grab some more wheat like so, and I'm going to add in some oats to this one, and some of that lovely red soteria, which is going to give it a really lovely Christmassy vibe. I think wreaths look nice when they've got lots of different textures, lots of different leaves, lots of different shapes. But it's your wreath, so you know, make it your way, however you see fit. I'm also going to pop in at this stage a nice piece of fern. So again, with the ferns, you can kind of break off some smaller pieces and use those on that inner edge just to make it go a bit further. And then you can have a lovely big piece like that. Cut it again to the same length. Pop it on, push everything up. Make sure that we're not losing any of our kind of really pretty stuff around the back. You want the back to kind of be your wheat, that wants to be your background, and then you want all of your beautiful flowers. Not that wheat isn't beautiful, but you want all of those kind of beautiful focal flowers to be kind of concentrated on the front face. Sometimes you put things on and it kind of twists and turns and you sort of lose things behind, but you can always just adjust it a little bit and pull them round. So binding on that piece in exactly the same way. So every now and then I like to pick my wreath up and have a little look at it, and I'll look at it from the front, but I'll also look at it from the back. When I look at it from the back, I'm better able to see my shape. I'm better able to see if I've started to suddenly kind of come in really short or come out really wide, and then I can see whether or not I've got a kind of a consistent circle going round, or whether I've started to kind of dip in and come out, and when you hung it up at the end it will look beautiful, but you won't have that very kind of clear circle shape. You'll have something a little bit more kind of wild and different, which, you know, if that's your vibe, fabulous, go with it. So we've got 3 big pieces on. I'm going to put one more big piece on, and then I'm going to show you how to put on your embellishments, and then I'm also going to show you how to finish off your wreath. So, a few more bits of wheat. I'm going to pop in something different, some of that, some of that, a hare's tail. So, cut those there. Again, push them all up nice and close to that first piece. And you're kind of coming down a tiny little bit each time because you're just kind of bringing that circle round. And what I tend to do is I tend to keep kind of turning as I go. So I'm always working on this section, and I turn and I work, rather than kind of keeping it in one place and then kind of getting to here and trying to, I kind of put a piece on, turn it a little bit, put another piece on, turn it. So I'm always kind of working at this kind of 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock position on the wreath, with each piece covering over the workings of the last piece. So, a couple of things you'll have if you've bought the traditional kit. You should have some pine cones and you should have some orange slices. So we're just going to wire those up. So with a pine cone, take one of those short pieces of green wire that I showed you earlier, and just find where the pine cone's naturally starting to open, and lay your green wire in there. Bring the 2 pieces of wire together and then give them a good twist like that. And then with your orange slices, you can put them on singly, or you can kind of double them up. So I've got a couple there that I've doubled up, they're overlapping like that. We're just going to pierce through very carefully using our green wire, and then we pull the 2 pieces of wire together, and just be really careful at this point because the oranges can be a little bit soft and you don't want to kind of just rip through them with the wire. Just twist that wire together really carefully, and then you've got them wired up like that. So you can make all of your wreath, and then at the end you can kind of go round and sort of stab your extra bits in. I prefer to add them in as I go, just because I find it a lot easier. I'm not then fighting to get through sort of all the stems of the things that I've already bound on there. So orange slices, I would just lay them on, kind of keep them on that inner edge. These are kind of, again, sort of focal items. You don't want to lose them up here amongst all the kind of the grasses and things. You want to kind of focus the eye on this inner circle. So you can put them on, you can kind of bend the bottom of the wire and just poke it through the moss and back on itself. But then I like to pick up that reel of wire and just go round a couple of times as well. And then the same with the pine cone. If you were going to put one of those on, you could just do exactly the same, just kind of stab through the moss, put it where you want it to be, and then on the other side, when the wires come out, bend it up and push it back in on itself. So that's really how you're going to make your wreath. You're going to continue just going round with the things that you've got until you get to the very end. And here's one that I've made earlier. So this one is one of our Winter Wonderland kits. This was an 8-inch base, so it's a little bit smaller than what the 12-inch kit's going to make, but still a really nice size wreath actually, this one. So I've pretty much made all of this. I just need to finish it off. So when you get to a point where you've just got that little gap left at the top there, you want to make up a nice bunch At this point, I'd probably try and make it a bit bigger in terms of width. So putting in a bit more wheat than perhaps you were using before. So I'm going to kind of put in maybe sort of 8 pieces, just because the last one's a little bit tricky to get in, and you don't want to kind of go to all the effort of wiring it in and then find that you've got to wire in another piece because you've not made it quite big enough. So cut those down exactly the same as usual, layer it up with a few different things. That one. Just going to put some oats and some wheat in, some of that, a piece of that. Okay, so this one I'd recommend you cut a bit shorter to how you've been cutting your others, just because you've got to tuck the base of these stems underneath that first piece that you wired on. So cut it a little bit shorter, and then we're lifting up. This is the very first piece that I bound on, so I'm lifting that up and holding it out of the way, and then I'm binding on and kind of sliding the base of the stems underneath, picking up the wire and binding round. And I have done exactly what I advised you not to do, which is I've made my last bunch a bit too small, so I'm going to go in again. So that's the drawing board, another bunch, make it nice and big, just because we don't want to see a gap at the top. So cut that one down, find some bits to pop in. So a couple of those, one of those. Okay, so again, cutting it a bit shorter, because I've got to now try and bury those under here, holding that first piece out of the way, sliding those stems and really kind of pushing them right under, picking up the wire, trying to get the wire as far down the base as you can. If you're wiring and the wire's too high up that bunch of flowers, then you're kind of pulling it all back over again, and again you'll end up with a bit of a gap that side. So as far down as we can go, pull it nice and tight. Okay, a couple of times, make sure that last pull is really nice and tight, because you're going to cut your wire off in a moment. You might want to put a little something just in that last little bit on the inner circle. So if you've got something like a pine cone already wired up, you can kind of poke that through on your last piece, and that's just going to hopefully cover up any wires that you can see. And then we go to the back of the wreath and we cut off the reel of wire with about 1 inch to spare, and then fold that piece back and poke it back in on itself. So that's all now nice and secure, and all that's left is to hang your wreath up and stand back and have a little look. So I'm going to hang mine here. So, and yes, I'm happy with that. I think that's how I'd like it to be. I've got a nice clear circle. I've got a nice circle in the middle. So with a dried wreath, you really only want to display these indoors if you want them to last. If you're not worried, if you just want it for one season, then by all means hang it outside. But if you're wanting it to last, you know, years upon years, then you want to keep it inside, away from the rain, away from sunlight, which can cause colour bleach on dried flowers. Yeah, so there's not really much else to say about making a dried wreath, I don't think. Obviously, if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments below or send us an email through our website. And I really hope you enjoy making your wreath. Thank you for taking time to watch today.